We are diving deep into, well, probably the defining figure of the modern digital age, a man whose unique blend of, let's call it artistic sensibility and sheer technical ruthlessness, fundamentally reshaped our world.
Exactly. Today, we are unpacking the extraordinary life and, yeah, the very controversial character of Stephen Paul Jobs.
And for you, our informed learner, this isn't just going to be a simple review of product launches. We're going way beyond the black turtleneck and the famous keynotes.
Right. We're here to synthesize the raw source material. Our mission is to really understand the defining synthesis, how Jobs managed to merge the humanities and the sciences.
And how his deeply complex personal journey, the adoption story, the intense spiritual searches, those tumultuous relationships, and of course, the controversial business decisions.
How all of that combined to produce this revolutionary vision.
So we're charting a course that starts a long way from Apple's sleek campus, back when his identity was still being forged, shaped by rebellion, non-traditional education, and just a relentless search for meaning.
It all starts with his very complex beginnings. Stephen Paul Jobs was born on February 24th, 1955, in San Francisco.
And his biological parents were Joanne Carol Schiebel, who had a Swiss-German Catholic background, and his father was Abdul Fattah Jandali from a prominent Syrian Muslim family.
And this is the critical part. Schiebel's family, especially her father, was vehemently opposed to the relationship, just completely against it.
Which led directly to the decision for a closed adoption.
Yeah, and even the adoption itself was immediately fraught with conditions. Joanne Schiebel had one very specific critical demand.
She wanted the adoptive parents to be college graduates. That was the deal.
Exactly. So when Paul and Clara Jobs, his eventual adoptive parents of German and Armenian descent, came forward, well, they didn't meet that requirement at all.
Not even close. They were working class people.
Right. And Schiebel, she initially refused to sign the adoption papers. She only relented after Paul and Clara made this explicit binding promise.
The promise being that they would absolutely pay for Steve's college tuition.
Yes. And you have to think about the pressure that puts on the entire family dynamic from day one. It's a huge financial obligation tied directly to this foundational emotional moment.
And it created this immediate, deep-seated loyalty that really defined his entire life. Jobs later said he would bristle whenever anyone called Paul and Clara his adoptive parents.
He declared them his parents 1,000%.
1,000%. And his rejection of his biological origins was just swift and permanent. He dismissed his birth parents as nothing more than his sperm and egg bank.
That's such an intense statement, and I think that intensity, that loyalty, later gets channeled into his fierce protection of Apple as his own creation.
And that connection to craft, to building things, it came directly from his adoptive father, Paul.
Absolutely. Paul was a mechanic and a machinist. He very purposefully built a workbench in the garage for Steve, hoping to instill a love of mechanics.
Which is funny because Jobs wasn't really interested in fixing engines, was he?
No, not at all. But he adored watching his father's meticulous construction. He admired the sheer skill Paul had in building anything that was needed, and especially in making the internals, the parts no one would see, clean and functional.
That focus on unseen detail is so crucial to understanding Apple, isn't it?
It's everything. Paul taught him that real craftsmanship applied even to the back of a cabinet or the inside of a fence where nobody would ever see it. That principle of holistic perfection became the cornerstone of Jobs' design philosophy later on.
So you've got this very nurturing environment at home, but then he gets to traditional school.
And it's a disaster, an absolute disaster. He frequently misbehaved, played pranks, some pretty major ones, and was often suspended.
And what's really revealing is Paul Jobs' reaction to all this.
Right. He never reprimanded Steve, not once.
Right.
Instead, he blamed the school system for failing to challenge his son.
That's a fascinating insight, isn't it, into the origin of his future personality. I mean, if the most important male figure in your life constantly validates the belief that the system is flawed, not you.
It absolutely feeds into a sense of exceptionalism. It's an early seed of what people would later call the reality distortion field.
And this all came to a head when he was bullied pretty severely at Crittenden Middle School. In the 7th grade, he gives his parents this dramatic ultimatum.
Move him out of the district or he'd drop out entirely.
And they did it. The parents capitulated. The family spent their entire life savings to move in 1967 to a 3-bedroom house in Cupertino on Christ Drive, just to get Steve into the better Cupertino school district.
The significance of that move is just immense. That exact house later became the initial site for Apple Computer.
The birthplace of the revolution. all because a 12-year-old demanded a better environment.
And it was around this time, in this, fertile new environment, that the intellectual fusion really began. Jobs saw himself fundamentally as a humanities person, but he couldn't deny his attraction to electronics.
He found his mission statement, so to speak, when he read about Edwin Land of Polaroid.
Yes, Land spoke passionately about the importance of people who could stand at the intersection of humanities and sciences. And for Jobs, that was it. That became his declared personal destiny.
So he gets to Homestead High School, and this is where he really starts connecting with the future.
He meets Bill Fernandez, who would later become Apple's first employee. And it's Fernandez who introduces him to this brilliant, slightly older electronics enthusiast,
Steve Wozniak.
the WUS. And Jobs' intellectual development in high school was this pure duality. He was totally immersed in electronics classes, building circuits.
But at the same time, he was obsessed with classic literature, devouring Shakespeare and Plato, and he specifically cited his profound admiration for King Lear.
This is the era where he's bridging that gap between technical expertise and philosophical thought.
And this blend of technical skill and sort of countercultural spirit didn't just manifest in his reading list. It manifested immediately in a business venture.
The infamous blue box.
Yeah. Exactly. Wozniak had read about it in Esquire, I believe, and then engineered his own low-cost digital box that could generate the network tones to make illicit, free, long-distance phone calls.
And Jobs, the budding entrepreneur, immediately saw the commercial opportunity in what was, let's be honest, illegal technology.
Of course he did. He decided they should manufacture and sell these boxes, splitting the profits with Wozniak. The business was technically criminal, but the experience was formative.
Hugely formative. Jobs later stated flat out that without the blue boxes, there wouldn't have been an Apple.
And his reasoning was fascinating. Why?
Because it showed them that they, two young outsiders, could effectively challenge and manipulate these giant, entrenched institutions like AT&T and Win. It instilled this anti-establishment ethos and the confidence to take enormous risks with future projects.
In parallel to this technical rebellion, his spiritual exploration was intensifying.
Right. By his senior year, Jobs started using LSD. And for him, these psychedelic experiences were not casual experimentation. He saw them as profound transformative moments.
He called them one of the 2 or 3 most important things he had done in his life.
He was deliberately seeking consciousness expansion, linking deeply into the whole counterculture's search for non-traditional wisdom.
Which leads him to Reed College in 1972.
An exceptionally expensive private liberal arts school in Portland, Oregon. A decision that honored that promise Paul and Clara had made and effectively drained their savings.
But the stay was famously brief.
1 semester. He dropped out after a single semester. He declared the formal education meaningless and said he didn't want to waste his parents' hard-earned money.
It's a remarkable contradiction, though, that financial sensitivity coexisting with his willingness to burn through their savings on a high-cost school in the first place.
Well, he was physically off the books, but he was mentally still invested. He continued to drop in and audit classes.
Right, the stories are legendary. Sleeping on friends' floors, returning Coke bottles for change to buy food, and relying on weekly free meals at the local Hare Krishna temple.
It was a period of intense asceticism, a conscious choice to live on the fringe.
And that ascetic, almost monastic existence led directly to maybe the single most consequential academic decision of his entire life.
He audited a calligraphy course taught by a former monk named Robert Palladino.
And the sources are so explicit about this, Jobs himself credited this course directly.
He did. He said if he hadn't audited that course, the Macintosh would never have featured multiple typefaces or proportionally spaced fonts.
And this isn't just about adding a feature, is it? It's about infusing a machine with aesthetics, with beauty.
It's the direct philosophical conduit. The beauty of the Macintosh's typography, which really sparked the whole desktop publishing revolution. It wasn't born from computer science. It was born from Zen design, the historical tradition of printing, and the artistry of letter forms.
It perfectly epitomized his intersection of humanities and sciences vision. It proved that the artistic and the technical could be one and the same.
This search for enlightenment then leads him to take a job at Atari as a computer technician in 1974.
But that was short-lived, too.
Very. He soon departed, embarking on a 7-month spiritual pilgrimage to India with his friend Daniel Kotke.
They visited ashrams, including Kainchi, though the revered guru Neem Karoli Baba had passed away by then.
Right. And also Haida Khan Babaji's ashram. And when Jobs returned to the U.S., the transformation was visible. Shaved head, traditional Indian clothing. the whole thing.
And this pilgrimage cemented his lifelong appreciation for Zen Buddhism.
It did. He and his then-girlfriend, Krisan Brennan, began practicing Zen with Master Kupen Chino Otagawa. Jobs even spent time at the Tasajar Zen Mountain Center.
He seriously contemplated becoming a monk in Japan, right?
He did. And this deep commitment to Zen profoundly influenced his demand for radical simplicity, for minimalism, for focus, the very principles that would guide all of Apple's future product designs.
So Jobs is back at Atari in early 1975, and this is where we see the first clear and kind of ugly manifestation of his ruthless business side.
Yes, the breakout story. So Atari co-founder Nolan Bushnell assigns Jobs to minimize the chip count for the breakout arcade game circuit board.
But Bushnell knew Jobs would just recruit Wozniak to do the actual engineering work.
Of course. And Wozniak delivered an engineering miracle. He worked nonstop for 4 days and managed to reduce the typical 100-plus chip count down to an incredible 45 chips.
And Atari had promised a significant bonus for every chip eliminated below a certain threshold.
Which resulted in a $5,000 bonus. But here is the critical moral failure.
Jobs, who had agreed to split the fee evenly with Wozniak, told him Atari had only paid $750.
So he hands Wozniak $375 and pockets the remaining $4,625 for himself.
And Wozniak didn't learn the truth for a decade.
A whole decade. And this anecdote, it's more than just a historical footnote. It's a profound psychological marker. It established the duality of Steve Jobs, the visionary who could inspire revolutionary engineering,
Coexisting with the executive who internalized the idea that business requires deception and financial ruthlessness, even against his closest friend.
Yet despite that betrayal, the vision was shared. On April 1st, 1976, Jobs and Wozniak, along with the less famous Ronald Wayne, co-founded the Apple Computer Company.
In Jobs' parents' garage. And they chose the name Apple after Jobs' time at the all-one farm Apple Orchard commune.
And to finance the initial run of 50 Apple I circuit boards, they had to be incredibly resourceful.
Wozniak sold his prized HP scientific calculator, and Jobs sold his Volkswagen van.
And their first major commercial validation came from a computer retailer, Paul Terrell, who bought all 50 of those assembled units for $500 each. And just like that, a garage hobby became a viable business.
The Apple II, introduced in 1977, that was the first real mass-market personal computer.
Absolutely. And while Wozniak was again the primary design genius creating the board, the operating system Jobs' influence was all over the physical packaging. He oversaw the development of that unique plastic case, ensuring the product had a clean, approachable look.
And even with that product's incredible success, their foundational ideological conflict flared up.
The famous debate over expansion slots.
Right. Jobs, who always prioritized simplicity and control, insisted the machine should have only 2 expansion slots.
While Wozniak, the ultimate open-source enthusiast who wanted users to modify and expand the computer infinitely, adamantly insisted on 8.
Wozniak actually threatened him, didn't he? He said if Jobs only included 2, he should go get himself another computer.
He did. And they settled on 8 slots, so Wozniak won that battle. But this conflict, Jobs' demand for a closed architecture versus Wozniak's desire for open expandability, that became the ideological battleground that defined Apple for the next 2 decades.
So the next big technological leap came in 1979.
After Jobs visited Xerox, PRRCX, and he immediately recognized the massive commercial potential of the mouse-driven graphical user interface, or GUI.
A radical shift away from command-line computing. This fueled the development of the Apple Lisa.
The Lisa was launched in 1983 as the first commercial PC with a GUI, but it was a spectacular commercial failure. It sold only about 100,000 units.
It was just too complex and way too expensive for the average business or consumer. Jobs was actually forced out of the Lisa project before it even launched.
Undeterred, he took over the Macintosh development team in 1981, aiming to perfect that Xerox PARC Lisa concept into a more unified, affordable package.
And the Mac launched with just immense fanfare on January 24, 1984.
A launch that was defined by this massive reality distortion field aimed at the public. It was preceded by that iconic cinematic 1984 Super Bowl commercial.
Directed by Ridley Scott, a $1.5 million ad that positioned the Macintosh as the heroic savior against the corporate Big Brother conformity of IBM. It was instantly hailed as a watershed event in advertising history.
But the hype couldn't sustain the sales. Despite the immediate fanfare, the Mac was expensive, and it quickly struggled on two fronts.
The cheap Commodore 64 in the consumer market and the affordable IBM PC clones that were rapidly dominating business.
So sales just tanked in late 1984, creating profound corporate pressure.
And what's so striking is how that corporate reality distortion field was operating simultaneously in his private life.
During this incredibly high-stakes period, his first daughter, Lisa Brennan, was born in 1978, and Jobs fiercely and very publicly denied paternity.
It was a legal and emotional battlefield. He was in court denying he was the father, even after a DNA test showed a 94.1% probability.
And at the same time, the Apple Lisa computer was under development. The official company acronym was Local Integrated Software Architecture.
But the reality was that his partner, Chrisanne Brennan, had named their child Lisa, and Jobs was using the name for his computer even while publicly denying the child.
The dissonance is just stunning. He only admitted to the naming truth decades later to his biographer, confirming, obviously, it was named for my daughter.
That episode, it just profoundly illustrates the tension, doesn't it? Jobs' immense desire for control and perfection meant he would deny biological reality if it complicated his self-image.
And yet he couldn't help but infuse his deepest personal connections directly into his creations.
So to manage this soaring growth and internal chaos at Apple, Jobs famously lured John Stelly from Pepsi-Cola in 1983.
And the pitch he used was pure Jobs, designed to appeal to that dualistic nature. Do you want to spend the rest of your life selling sugared water, or do you want a chance to change the world?
Scully chose changing the world, but the partnership was pretty much doomed by those foundational ideological differences we talked about earlier.
Right. Jobs was maniacally devoted to the closed architecture Macintosh, which was struggling. Scully, a professional executive, favored the open architecture Apple II, which was still the company's most reliable profit generator.
And the internal divisions became paralyzing. The teams were duplicating efforts, wasting resources, and the Macintosh division, fueled by Jobs' intensity, acted like a separate, financially irresponsible company.
And this discord also prompted the departure of key talent, including Wozniak in early '85. He was just frustrated by the company's sidelining of the Apple II, even though he and Jobs remained friends.
And the culmination of all this came in May 1985. Scully and the board reorganized the company.
And they effectively stripped Jobs of all operational authority over the Macintosh group, reassigning him to this toothless role of new product development.
Jobs, who was just unable to function without direct control, responded by hatching a plan to stage a boardroom coup and oust Scully.
But the plan was discovered, Jobs was confronted by the board, and he had no leverage left. He submitted his resignation on September 17, 1985.
But he didn't just walk away quietly. He staged a theatrical departure. 5 key senior Apple employees resigned alongside him to found his new company, NXT.
It was a signal that while Jobs had lost the corporate war, his personal vision still commanded profound loyalty.
And the aftermath of his departure was, well, disastrous for Apple. The expensive Mac continued to struggle.
And Scully, desperate to keep application development going, granted Microsoft a crucial license for the Mac operating system software, a decision that was just devastatingly pivotal.
Because it enabled all those cheap Windows-based IBM PC clones to flood the market, eventually dominating personal computing by replicating Apple's defining advantage, the graphical interface, at a fraction of the cost.
So Jobs founded NXT Inc. with $7 million of his own money. He was focused on creating a revolutionary workstation for the higher education market.
And when funding dried up, he managed to secure a major investment from the famed Texas billionaire Ross Perot.
His comeback was classic Jobs spectacle. He unveiled the NXT computer in 1988 at this lavish, invitation-only event, a huge multimedia extravaganza designed to convey the immense intellectual promise of this new machine.
But history repeated itself, didn't it?
It did. The workstation, released in 1990, sold for an astronomical $9,999.
Which, adjusted for inflation, is what, like $24,000 today?
Something like that. It was technically advanced. It had an object-oriented operating system, advanced software capabilities. But just like the Lisa, the cost made it commercially prohibitive for its target market.
And he ran NXT with that same obsessive perfectionism.
Demanding aesthetic flawlessness. He insisted on details like the beautiful dark magnesium case of the NeXT Cube. But this focus on perfection led to production delays and kept the cost unmanageable.
After selling only 50,000 machines, NXT had to face reality.
So in 1993, they made a radical but necessary pivot. They abandoned hardware manufacturing entirely, focusing purely on software, and released the Next Step operating system for Intel machines.
And this was the moment the failure became the foundation for the future.
The legacy of this expensive failure is just astounding. Next Step evolved directly into the core foundation of Mac OS X when Apple acquired them years later.
And what's perhaps even more remarkable is the fact that Tim Berners-Lee used a NeXT computer at CERN in 1990 to invent the World Wide Web.
Think about that incredible paradox. One of the most commercially unsuccessful computers of its era secretly birthed the most transformative global technology, the Internet, and provided the eventual operating system that saved Apple.
It just shows that commercial failure doesn't necessarily negate technological brilliance.
And not only that, the Web Objects framework developed at NXT became the engine for Apple's entire digital strategy when Jobs returned. It was used to build the critical infrastructure for the Apple Store, MobileMe, and the entire iTunes Store.
So the technological blueprint for Apple's eventual dominance was entirely forged during the years Jobs was in exile.
And while he's focused on building the software for the future at NXT, he is simultaneously conquering Hollywood.
In 1986, he acquired Lucasfilm's computer graphics division for $10 million, a $5 million purchase price and $5 million in capital, and spun it off as Pixar. He served as primary investor and chairman.
This was a massive financial risk, but it paid off spectacularly. Pixar's first full-length feature film with Disney, Toy Story in 1995, where Jobs was credited as executive producer,
Was a colossal financial and critical success. It established the studio as a creative powerhouse overnight.
And under his tenure, the studio just consistently delivered groundbreaking animation and box office hits, racking up multiple Academy Awards for Best Animated Feature.
Finding Nemo, The Incredibles, Ratatouille, Toy Story 3, the list goes on. This solidified his standing not just as a tech guru, but as a genuine force in media and entertainment.
The relationship with Disney had its ups and downs. Contract negotiations with the then CEO Michael Eisner failed spectacularly in 2004.
Right. Jobs publicly declared he would stop dealing with Disney altogether.
But when Bob Iger replaced Eisner in 2005, relations mended very quickly.
Which culminated in 2006 when Disney purchased Pixar for $7.4 billion in an all-stock transaction.
This was the ultimate act of financial alchemy for Jobs. Upon the merger's completion, he received 7% of Disney shares, instantly becoming the company's largest single shareholder and joining the board of directors.
His personal holding in Disney was vastly larger than that of any member of the Disney family or the previous executive team.
And this second act Jobs, he demonstrated a profound maturity in his management style. Pixar co-founder Edwin Catmull detailed what he called the Catmull consensus method for resolving conflicts with Jobs.
Right. Kamal said that when they disagreed, he would wait a week and then present a detailed counterargument.
And the outcome was always one of three possibilities. About a third of the time, Jobs admitted Catmull was correct.
Another third, Catmull realized that Jobs was actually right after all.
And the final third, when they still couldn't reach consensus, Jobs would just let Catmull proceed his way and never interfered again.
Which is a staggering shift from the dictatorial, control-obsessed style he had during the Macintosh Wars, where he often humiliated engineers and insisted on his own way immediately.
At Pixar, he learned the value of creative autonomy and delegation, a lesson that would prove invaluable when he returned to Apple.
So by 1996, Apple is in catastrophic shape. It's struggling financially, facing imminent bankruptcy.
And after initially exploring the purchase of B Inc., Apple settled on acquiring NXT in 1997 for $400 million, primarily to get its advanced Next Step operating system and, critically, to get Jobs himself back.
He returns first as a strategic advisor, but quickly becomes the de facto chief, and then permanent CEO in 2000, calling himself the ICEO.
And his first order of business was radical focus and simplification.
He immediately launched the purge. He terminated several financially non-profitable or scattered projects, including the Newton PDA and the experimental CyberDog web browser.
The sources describe the psychological impact of his leadership style pretty vividly, noting his summary executions were rare, but a handful of victims was enough to terrorize a whole company into absolute alignment with his priorities.
And the strategic moves were critical. He eliminated the costly Macintosh clone licensing program, which was diluting the brand,
Ensuring that the Mac platform was once again solely controlled by Apple hardware, And he also formalized his crucial career-defining partnership with the British designer Jony Ive.
Which established the look and feel design philosophy that would secure hundreds of future design patents for them.
This whole period was framed by the famous Think Different advertising campaign. And this wasn't just a marketing slogan, it was a psychological rebranding.
It repositioned Apple from a struggling relic into the brand for creative rebels and innovators, perfectly leveraging Jobs' own countercultural background.
And the first major consumer product demonstrating this new focus was the iMac G3 in 1998.
It was revolutionary not just for its cartoon-like, translucent Bondi blue plastic design, but for the technological choices it forced onto the market.
He abandoned the old floppy disk drive and mandated the exclusive use of USB for peripherals.
Which was a classic high-stakes maneuver. By eliminating older, established technology, a risk few other manufacturers would take, Apple forced the entire peripheral industry to catch up.
And the success of the iMac G3 rapidly popularized the USB standard. Third-party manufacturers even started mimicking the translucent plastic look. Jobs summed up the focus of this era perfectly when he reminded his employees that real artists ship.
A necessary antidote to the perfectionism that had crippled the original Macintosh launch.
So with the Mac stabilized, Jobs turned his attention to creating a digital ecosystem, identifying the PC itself as the digital hub for all consumer electronics.
A vision that began to take shape with the launch of the iPod in 2001.
The iPod's core innovation was its physical compactness, which was achieved by sourcing a unique, small 1.8-inch hard drive. The first-gen iPod, selling for $399, made Apple an instant major player in the portable music industry.
And it rapidly prepared the company for its next major strategic move.
But the hardware was only part of the genius. The true lock-in was the iTunes ecosystem.
iTunes served as the media player, the content library, and most crucially, the store. This seamless integration allowed users to purchase and download media easily,
creating a high-margin hardware device connected to a sticky, low-margin content service.
And again, this ecosystem's reliance on the Next-T technology is often overlooked. The WebObjects framework, salvaged from Jobs' expensive failure, was the very software used to run the highly successful iTunes Store and later the App Store.
Proving the value of that long-term software vision.
And then the entire market was just shattered again in 2007 with the launch of the iPhone. Apple successfully entered the cellular phone business with this revolutionary multi-touch display smartphone.
The public interest was immediate and overwhelming. 6 out of every 10 Americans were aware of its release, and Time magazine declared it the invention of the year for 2007 because it completely revolutionized mobile browsing and application use.
The improvements came fast after that. The iPhone 3G added GPS and 3G data. The iPhone 4s introduced the sophisticated Siri virtual assistant.
And then came the iPad in 2010, an iOS-based tablet computer focused on the simplicity of the multi-touch screen and virtual keyboard. By April 2015, over 250 million iPads have been sold globally.
He had finally delivered completely on that intersection of humanities and sciences, creating these minimalist, beautiful devices that were profoundly easy for consumers to use.
And Jobs was globally admired and, well, also criticized for his unparalleled skill at persuasion, known universally as the reality distortion field, or RDF.
This charisma, which could convince employees to achieve the impossible or convince audiences of the inevitable future, was most visible during his Steve Notes at Macworld.
His entire strategic philosophy was encapsulated in that, quote, he famously attributed to hockey legend Wayne Gretzky.
I skate to where the puck is going to be, not where it has been.
Exactly. He wasn't interested in competing with current rivals. He was obsessed with defining the future playing field before anyone else even arrived.
And that certainty bred some profound rivalries, particularly with Michael Dell, the founder of Dell Computer.
Jobs had publicly criticized Dell for years for making uninnovative beige boxes. The feud escalated in 1997 when Dell publicly suggested Apple should shut it down and give the money back to the shareholders.
And Jobs held that grudge, fueled by his need for vindication, for nearly a decade.
The moment of ultimate revenge came in 2006. When Apple's market capitalization officially surpassed Dell's, Jobs famously emailed all Apple employees.
And it was just a single triumphal line. Team. It turned out that Michael Dell wasn't perfect at predicting the future, Steve.
It was absolute public vindication for all those years of exile and struggle.
And this desire for control, it extended to his public image. He adopted a daily uniform.
The black, long-sleeved mock turtleneck made by Issey Miyake, Levi's 501 blue jeans, and New Balance 991 sneakers.
And while he claimed it was for daily convenience, it served a profound psychological and branding purpose, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Instant recognizability, stability, and total control over his presentation to the world.
And the ultimate measure of his relentless focus is found in the final months of his life. Even while terminally ill in the hospital, he was sketching new devices.
Suggesting simplified designs for medical equipment and actively sketching ways to hold the iPad while confined to a hospital bed. His need to innovate and perfect was constant, right up to his final hours.
So his search for his biological origins was profoundly delayed by his loyalty to his adoptive mother.
It was. He waited until after Clara Jobs died in early 1986 to even begin the search. He explained, "I never wanted Paul and Clara to feel like I didn't consider them my parents, because they were totally my parents. I loved them so much that I never wanted them to know of my search."
After receiving permission from his adoptive father, Paul, he followed a letter left by a doctor and eventually found his birth mother, Joanne Shibble Simpson.
Who expressed just deep regret over the adoption. And it was through Shebel that Jobs learned he had a younger sister, Mona Simpson.
An acclaimed novelist who was entirely unaware she had an older brother.
They met and quickly formed an extremely close bond, becoming really good friends. Mona Simpson later chronicled the search for their biological father in her 1992 novel, The Lost Father.
And here is the truly incredible, almost fictional twist to fate. When Mona Simpson finally located their biological father, Abdul Fattah Jandali.
He was working as the vice president of a Mediterranean restaurant in Sacramento.
Jandali, speaking to Mona, completely unaware she was his daughter, mentioned how a very famous, wealthy man used to visit his restaurant.
And he described this customer as a sweet guy and a big tipper, adding, "Even Steve Jobs used to come in here."
We have to pause on that irony. The biological father unknowingly waiting on his billionaire son, sharing small talk across a restaurant table. It just underscores his lifelong loyalty to Paul Jobs, doesn't it?
It underscores it entirely. Jobs had indeed met the man, but after learning the truth, he refused to ever meet Jandali again. He said he believed Jandali hadn't treated his children well, and now that Jobs was wealthy and famous, he didn't trust Jandali not to exploit the relationship.
The loyalty and protection he felt for his adoptive family remained paramount.
So the complexity of Jobs' genius, the absolute certainty of the reality distortion field, it came crashing down when faced with biological reality.
In October 2003, he was diagnosed with a rare, less aggressive islet cell neuroendocrine tumor in his pancreas.
And this particular cancer, for this specific type of tumor, was highly treatable with immediate surgery. But Jobs resisted that conventional medical advice for 9 critical months,
choosing instead to apply his immense willpower and certainty to alternative medicine.
He pursued unproven remedies, a rigorous vegan diet, intense herbal remedies, acupuncture, consulting a psychic, and a doctor who prescribed juice fasts and bowel cleansings.
It was the reality distortion field applied to his own biology, the belief that his superior intellect and willpower could force his illness to conform to his preferences.
And critics are very clear that this 9-month delay was likely fatal. They argue it likely cost him his life by allowing the cancer to progress beyond the point of easy containment.
Jobs did eventually regret the delay. He finally underwent a pancreatic duodenectomy, or Whipple procedure, in July 2004.
But the success was only temporary. The tumor returned, and by early 2009, his health had declined so severely that he required a liver transplantation, which he received in Memphis, Tennessee.
And the secrecy around his health was intense. It was a corporate cover-up designed to maintain confidence and prevent stock fluctuation.
Right. After his 2008 WWDC keynote, where he looked thin, almost gaunt, Apple officials just claimed he had a common bug. Jobs himself responded to the swirling rumors by paraphrasing Mark Twain, "The reports of my death are greatly exaggerated."
On a deeply personal level, though, we see a rare vulnerability. Tim Cook, finding they shared a rare blood type, offered Jobs a portion of his own liver, knowing the donor organ can regenerate.
And Jobs, despite the extreme urgency of his situation, flatly refused. He yelled at Cook, "I'll never let you do that. I'll never do that."
That moment, the refusal of the ultimate gift of life from a trusted colleague, is so revealing.
It highlights his intense, often irrational self-reliance and perhaps a reluctance to be dependent, even in the face of death.
Jobs finally announced his resignation as CEO on August 24th, 2011, noting that the day had come when he could no longer meet the demands of his duties.
He died 6 weeks later, on October 5, 2011, due to complications from a relapse of the tumor, which resulted in respiratory arrest.
And his sister, Mona Simpson, recounted his final words. Hours before he died, he looked past his assembled family and repeated a phrase 3 times.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. He was buried in an unmarked grave at Alta Mesa Memorial Park.
So despite his immense wealth and cultural influence, Jobs' stance on philanthropy remains one of the most controversial and mysterious aspects of his legacy.
Right, the media frequently criticized him and Apple for being unusually and inexplicably mysterious or absent in terms of corporate giving compared to his peers.
There was an early attempt to engage, right? He formed the Stephen P. Jobs Foundation after leaving Apple.
But he closed it quickly with no results after launching NXT. What's far more contentious is that when he returned to Apple in 1997, he immediately eliminated all existing corporate philanthropic programs.
Which the sources note were never to be restored.
Apple was subsequently listed in 2007 among America's least philanthropic companies, though they did later begin a program matching employee gifts. The corporate philosophy just seemed to be that Apple's contribution to society should be purely product-based.
And this belief was really crystallized by his refusal to sign the Giving Pledge.
The campaign launched by Bill Gates and Warren Buffett in 2010, encouraging billionaires to donate the majority of their wealth to charity. Jobs clearly believed his personal revolutionary contribution to culture and technology was superior to, or at least superseded, traditional direct charity.
And that philosophical difference is crucial. The Gates and Buffett view is about solving macro, global problems, disease, poverty through massive cash infusions.
Whereas Jobs' view was that by solving micro-user problems through elegant, intuitive design, by giving people tools like the iPhone and the iPad, he was offering a superior, transformative, cultural contribution.
And if we look at that cultural contribution, his influence is indisputable.
He is listed as primary or co-inventor on over 450 patents in the U.S., 346 of which are U.S. patents. And these weren't typically mechanical inventions.
No, they were mostly design patents related to the look and feel of the product, shared closely with Jony Ive.
And his focus remained purely aesthetic and experiential until the very end. In a final, powerful testament to his lifelong obsession with design and user interface, the patent on the macOS X dock user interface with its distinctive magnification feature
Was actually issued the day before he died.
Posthumous recognition has been swift and broad, cementing his place as an American icon. He was awarded the Grammy Trustees Award in 2012, named a Disney Legend in 2013, and in 2022, he posthumously received the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
Okay, so let's unpack this. This deep dive into Steve Jobs, it really reveals a figure who successfully took the spiritual quest, the Zen minimalism, and the respect for craft he learned from his father and his countercultural youth.
And fused it with groundbreaking engineering. He was the pioneer of the PC revolution and the architect of the digital ecosystem we all now inhabit.
But he was a character defined by radical dualities that fueled his success. The sensitive individual who deeply loved his adoptive parents and bonded with his biological sister, juxtaposed with the ruthless executive who cheated Wozniak and terrified his employees into alignment.
And that duality created a transformative leader, but a profoundly challenging human being.
His entire professional existence was based on a radical certainty, a confidence so total that he could command the reality distortion field and successfully skate to where the puck was going to be.
And that leads to our final provocative thought for you, the learner, to consider. We know that Jobs resisted proven medical science for 9 months, favoring alternative treatments, essentially applying his reality distortion field to his own cancer. So, given his lifelong genius was predicated on bending reality to his will, what are the implications of that visionary certainty when it's applied to the unavoidable and unpredictable realities of life and death? How does that failure of certainty in his final years reveal the ultimate tension between the man who controlled every single detail of his products and the complexity of the world he ultimately could not control?